Hey, what's up, everybody? Championship Leadership Podcast here, and I'm really excited. We have Sabrina Stanley, who's in
Hi.
Colorado. She just finished the Diagonale de Fous, one of the challenging 100-mile races out there in France, and she took first as a female, which is she's the first American, I believe, ever to do that. And she's been on the scene not that long, since 2015 is the first time you attempted 100 miles. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say I've been, I guess, officially on the scene since like 2016. 2007 or 2015 was just like barely dipping my big toe into the water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, as the listeners know, I'm a definite amateur when it comes to 100-mile races, but I enjoy the mental side of it more than any challenge that there is. But I just appreciate you being here. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I'm stoked to be here. I agree with you on 100 milers. It's so much more mental and physical, and that's why I enjoy them too.
Yeah, yeah. And so I like to start it off always by just asking, the name of the podcast is Championship Leadership. What comes to mind for you, especially as a highly elite and competitive runner? Championship leadership. I'm interested to hear what you mean.
I would say just keeping yourself accountable to yourself. So like getting out, and whether it's work or training or whatever your passion is, like putting yourself into 100%, and then being honest when you're not, or when you have a down day or whatever, and then remaining positive through that. Because it's easy to slip into that negative mindset and then just get into that rut, and it's so hard to break free of that. So just being self accountable, and then knowing when you're slacking and pushing even harder the next time.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, well, let's tell everyone else. I was saying right before I did a Spartan, and I didn't get to meet you, but you were introduced to us as we were about to do a trail run. And how did you, like, what's your story? Yeah, how did you get into this? And we could talk a little bit more about just the experiences and what you learned.
For sure. Yeah, so I grew up one of 6 kids, so there's a lot in my family, and my parents always had us in team sports and super competitive, like always, I guess, like wrestling with my brothers, or like who can do this the fastest, or who's the strongest doing this, or like whatever it was a competition. But I was never in individual sports, including anything running. I was never really like pushed in that direction. And then in high school, I kind of stumbled upon this girl said she ran 7 miles a day. And so I was like, oh, that sounds like crazy. Like I've never heard of anybody running more than a mile.
Yeah.
And so I think I was a sophomore in high school, and I ran 7.2 miles every single day. I started doing it like, can I do this? And then it became like an addiction. Like, oh, I have to get my run in.
Yeah.
And it was the same like 7-mile path every single day, which now sounds crazy to me. But so that was like where I learned to love running. And then in college, I kind of did it just to stay in shape. Traveled around a little bit and ended up in Colorado. And that's where I discovered trails. I was living in a small town, and you can't really run the highways because it's just not safe. Where I came from, a bunch of country roads, and that's all you ran. So moving to Colorado like forced me onto the trails, and I was living right next door to Leadville, which has the Leadville 100. And so I'm just going to put my name into this. I'd done like 5 marathons. So I'm going to put my name into this and see what happens. My name was drawn in the lottery. And that first 100 miler, I ended up dropping at 87 due to time cutoff. And like I had family fly out, and like I had these like grand visions of like, I'm going to go out there and just be like the fastest girl they've ever seen and all this stuff. And so when it all came crashing down at mile 87, like I was distraught. And I said, I actually moved to New York for a job and was there for 8 months and put my name in for Leadville again. And I said, if my name gets drawn for Leadville again, like that's a sign, and I have to go back to Colorado and I have to do it right. My name doesn't get drawn, then I'm going to pursue this corporate career, and I'm going to be like, I don't know, living in a penthouse in New York City. And so my name was drawn, and so I gave up my job and like took like, I don't know, a huge pay cut, and started working at a local running store in Breckenridge. And I said, like, I'm going to give everything to this passion. And so I hit up Avery Collins on Facebook. I'm like, can you grab a beer with me? Like, I want to pick your brain. Because he was like on the upcome, I guess, and like starting to be really successful in it. And so I just wanted to be as good as I could be. And so through meeting him, I learned how to train, and it kind of just took off. And every year I feel like I reach a new level, and I'm super, super excited. I'm literally living my dream. So it's kind of crazy to think back to like when I first started and how bad I wanted it then, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, I can relate because my very first one, I missed the cutoff, and it was really my fault more than anything, but I definitely wasn't prepared like I should have been either. But for you, so you literally, like, your path in life was kind of up to whether
Yeah.
again. Like,
yeah, for
if it
sure.
happens, all right, that's what I'm gonna do. If not, I guess I'm just gonna go live in a penthouse in New York. Um, what are the chances, number one, that you get picked 2 years in a row?
Right. I don't know the stats on getting picked for Leadville. I have heard, and this is all hearsay, so who knows what's real, that if you're a female, like your chances are much, much higher.
Okay.
But I've also heard people that have been in the lottery for 3 or 4 years and haven't got drawn.
All right.
So
Well,
I
you were
don't
definitely
really know.
destined to be doing what you're doing, I think, right?
I would assume so. Yeah. I mean, I like to think to some extent like you choose your own path, and like I would have ended up here regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, my name getting drawn definitely, like I think a month later I put in my 2 weeks, and yeah, I was out of there. It's like, it's just, there's no mountains to run in New York City, so I gotta go somewhere else.
No, that's incredible. So tell me, yeah, how do you, or do you, what's the process for you after a race, win or lose? And you've been doing a lot of winning lately, which is amazing. But of course, it's not by chance for that either, because you put in miles, and you're out there preparing yourself to be there. So how do you really take the experiences from each race, from race to race, to really help you be better in the next one and in life outside?
Yeah. I feel like it's not, to me, it's not like a negative perspective, but at the same time, like I feel like I could always do better. Like no matter how good my race was, like there's always a second to be earned here, or a minute here, or how long did I spend in the aid stations? Was I being mentally weak here and like letting my pace slack off more than I should have? And so I just kind of like relook at that. And then if I don't see any like follies in any of those, then it's okay, then could I have trained better to be faster? Like, yeah, I was pushing 100% the entire race, but could I have been faster? And how do I do that outside of race day, And so I'd say that's kind of like my big takeaway from any race. And I like to like dig through my races and like really talk about it. So like Avery kind of just has to listen to me kind of work my way through the race afterwards. And then outside of racing, I think, I don't know, I would say when it comes to my training and my racing, I'm very type A. When it comes to life outside of that, I'm not type A at all.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like I put so much energy into being like so dialed in for my races that it's nice to like breathe a little bit outside of that and just be more, like, not like flippant, but just more relaxed and not so like on edge all the time. Like this isn't perfect, or this isn't where it's supposed to go. So like, I think there's a nice balance there of like being driven in something, but at the same time not carrying that over into your daily life and just being too, I don't know, analytical with everything.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great balance, right? Because when you think of the best, like you can think like Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan comes to mind, and I think it kind of spilled over into all areas of their life, to where maybe it was all basketball, it was all golf, or whatever elite athlete
Right.
at the top of their game you look at. Really, the rest of their life kind of gets burnt to the ground.
For sure, yeah.
And it sounds like you have a great, like, it is definitely in the running, but you're not allowing that to like just take over everything else.
Definitely, yeah. I'd say I'm like a lot more, I don't know if carefree is the right word, but if we're not associating with running, I'm definitely a lot more relaxed.
Yeah. So is there someone that really helped to get you to this path? Like, have you always been driven to want to do a little bit better, or to really, pour everything that you have into it to be the best? Or yeah, where did this drive come from?
I think it's just honestly like trial and error. Like I knew my end point and I know where I want to be. And I knew like my 5-year, my 10-year, my 20-year, like what are my big goals in life and how do I get there? And start on a small scale. So like in 1 year, if that's where you want to be, like how do you get there? And you don't always reach it, but through failing, like you learn, I could have done this better, And so I would say, I don't know if it was like self-taught, because like I would say my parents are pretty driven, especially my mother. But yeah, I just trial and error. Like how do I get to where I want to be and make that goal number one? And so then everything else goes by the wayside. Like if this hypothetical like piece of cake isn't going to help me get to the finish line in first place, then I'm probably not going to have it. But at the same time, if I'm in off season or it's not like a huge training week or something, like I do give myself that leeway. So and just being like hyper focused months, years in advance, I think is really the key.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that, your first experience at 100 miles, did that help you? Had you finished, do you think that there would have been, you would have come out of that differently?
Oh, for sure. If I'd finished, I think I would have been like, oh, I could have done faster here, done this better, but I would have like put myself in like a middle of the pack box and like, this is what I'm capable of doing 100 miles. Like,
yeah.
Even though it was my first attempt, like that's just how good I am. And that's what I came away with. But through failing, the next time I ran 100 miles, like I knew I was going into it, like with the best preparation I could have at that point for my knowledge of how the sport works. And so when I went into my second one and I took 4th at Leadville that year, and like my dream going in was top 10 female, which top 10 female at Leadville, like I wouldn't say it's crazy competitive. Okay. And so top 10, I told my boyfriend Avery at the time, like, this is my goal. And he kind of laughed. He's like, you can definitely do that. And so coming away 4th was, to me, like huge confidence boost. And then after that, I ran a golden ticket race to get into Western States and took 2nd. And my time on that race course was comparable to elites at the time. Yeah. And so then I went into Western and took 3rd at Western. And so it was just like this snowball effect. Like each race got better and better. And then I started like comparing my time to other females. I'm like, oh, I can do this. And I like just think if I have like years under my belt instead of like 8 months or whatever it is. Yeah. And so I just became more and more dialed in as I progressed. Yeah.
So are there certain races out there where you just like, you really are driven to be like, I would really love to win this race or this race? And it seems like, even distances, like you kind of, is 100 miles where you're at, is 200 miles in the picture?
Yeah, for sure. I would say Leadville, Western. I would like to win Hard Rock in both directions. So Leadville, Western, Hard Rock, and there's UTMB. I know it sounds crazy, but I would like to win each of those races at least once in my lifetime, and I think I will. It's just timing and making sure you get to the start line not injured and being patient. I mean, you could run Western, Hard Rock, UTMB the same year, but you might do well at Western, and then like each race after that I feel like your body just gets more and more beat up. So I take my race schedule pretty seriously and make sure that if I'm at a start line, I'm at 100%, and I don't over race. And so those would be like my big 4. And then if you want to throw in a 200 miler, I would say Tour de Jean, which is in Italy. Okay. So I crewed it for Avery last year. To be honest, I'm scared of that race. Like I'm scared to sign up for it because I feel like that's a commitment. Like you're not running, I mean, depending on your recovery, but most people I talk to after doing that race, like they're on the couch for 6 months afterwards because there's like 200 miles just does a number to your body. Yeah. So that one might be a little bit more in the distant future. But I think 100 miles is where I excel. And so while I'm good at that, I'm going to try and do the most competitive races and do them well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and you mentioned Avery multiple times as someone that definitely impacts you. And in your running and in your life. Yeah. So talk to me, who are one or two people that really, maybe as a coach, as a leader, that you've looked up to directly or indirectly, who have been some of those people, and so who are they, number one, but also like really what have they brought to your life that you've really learned from to implement into what you're doing today?
Yeah. So obviously, like the most direct correlation to somebody that's affected by running is Avery. From the moment I met him, we started running together, and he just showed me the kind of weekly mileage I should be putting in, the like types of workouts, how often, the amount of vertical, just like he really dialed in my training. And then outside of running, I would say my grandpa, he was paralyzed at the age of 27, and was told he's never going to walk again, like that whole like story you've probably heard a million times. And when he got out of the hospital, he said, like, I'm going to walk again. And like his muscles all like atrophied, and like his legs never like worked again, but he like had these crutches and would like swing his legs and walk. And like he had his pilot's license and he drove, and he was just the most positive person that I've ever met, with like probably one of the roughest hands that he could have been dealt in life. And so just his last few years of life, he lived with us, and I was in high school. And so just being around that like positive energy nonstop, and just a true fighter from the go, I think really like no matter what happens to you, like you can get through it. And I couldn't imagine at 27 being super active and like losing my motion from the waist down. And so I would say he's a big influence as well in my life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And how important is it to you to, as you win more races, right? I would imagine you're starting to see more attention, good and possibly bad. I don't know, but as you get that, I think also there's more people that probably start to look up to you, probably even younger girls look up to someone like you, and you're like, man, I want to do that. I want
Yeah.
doing. Like, how much of that do you think about as you are on this journey?
I do think about it, and I feel, with every race, like this last one I just did, it was mainly little girls would come up to me and ask for my autograph, or even like their mothers like wanted pictures with me. And like it was so like the French are very like, it's a real, not that it's not a real sport in America, but like the French and just Europe in general, like trail running is a whole nother level. Like most races are televised and people follow it, and they know like the race, I don't know, like the schedule, and they want to know what races you're doing next. Where in America, like if you tell your family you're doing a race, they've never heard of it, and like they'll follow you, but they don't really fully grasp the level. Like they don't follow the sport, they follow your races. And so just this last race, like having all those people come up to me afterwards, and like it's just so surreal. I feel like in the sport itself, like I'm a little bit more outspoken than some athletes, and I have gotten some negative feedback with that. So I've like tried to really like not spend a lot of time on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, because I feel like it's just like a negative mental space to like it's either people complaining about something or blaming other people for why their race went bad or whatever it is. And like it's hard for me to bite my tongue and be like, you should probably just look in the mirror. And so I've kind of tried to distance myself from most social media. And you can even like set up a timer on Instagram, so it'll tell you, like my Instagram tells me if I've been on it for more than 10 minutes a day. And so like that's when I know it's like,
I had no
it's
idea.
Like time to step away. Yeah. And if like I see my 10-minute timer go off, like it lights up my screen, I'm like, shoot, like the goal is not to reach that 10 minutes every day, And so I would say just like trying to not worry about other people, like stay focused on what you're going after, and hopefully that's a good influence to other little girls out there who are dreaming of being in this position.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I just feel lucky that you saw my message on Instagram now, knowing that you have a 10-minute timer.
Well, I don't abide by it as often as I should. I mean, I try to, I really do. But I mean, there are some days where it's just like, it's a drug. Like social media is a drug. Sure. And like, I have been getting better, I'd say, over the last year, but I mean, there was, a time where you look down at your phone and you realize, like, I haven't done anything productive in like the last hour. Like, where is this time gone? And am I better for it after this hour? Probably not, And so, yeah, that's just my take on social media.
Totally, yeah, I agree 100%. What's tell us a little bit about training, and do you typically run on your own? Do you train with other people? How much mileage do you put in on a typical week? Let's say leading into a race.
So I would say it really depends on the time of year and the race coming up and Avery's race schedule. But I'd say for the year, we probably run together like somewhere between 25 and 50% of the time, depending on that season and, who's tapering and who's not. I really enjoy running alone. Like if we have friends in town or something, like I might get out with them once, but I'm not a big like group run type person. And as far as mileage, so like 2 weeks before a race, I really cut it down to, I'd say 2 weeks out, 40 miles, the week of maybe 25. And then the weeks like 5, 4, and 3, I'm trying to hit triple figures. We live in Silverton, which like we're at 9,300 feet. And like everything you're running you're going straight up or straight down. And so sometimes those triple digits don't happen just because your miles are so much slower, and to get them, you would be out there for 60 hours a week or whatever, which sometimes I am. But I'd say, weeks 5 through 3 are like my huge volume weeks. Most other weeks, I'd say I'm in the 70 to 90 range. And then after a race, I try to take off at least for 100 milers, at least 10 days after, with like out any running whatsoever, just to make sure my body is like back on track with my metabolism and my sleep. And even like you can't, I think, feel every little thing that you do during 100 miles, and so those 10 days I think just really reset my body, and it makes me want to like crave running again afterwards. And so like that day 11, like I'm itching just to go for a little bit of like just a few miles. I think that hunger to get back out there is important too.
No, I think that's really important to talk about, because the mentality, especially nowadays, and maybe this will lead a little bit, like, I don't know, how familiar are you with David Goggins?
I would say pretty familiar. Like I've read his book, I've listened to a couple podcasts of his. Definitely familiar with his story and where he's at.
His story, his mentality, right? It's, the Moab 240 just recently, he got off course.
Right.
Had some high altitude sickness, hospital,
for sure,
kicked off. And of course, he comes back against doctor's orders and finishes the race, right? That's kind of who he is. And I kind of feel like, in a way, maybe he's trapped himself into that a little bit too. Like, especially now with the book. And
it's success, an image, yeah.
I gotta go back and now do this because I am David Goggins, and that's what everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure he like wants to, because I think that's also his mentality, is like you have to finish what you start.
Yes, totally.
But it's definitely an image now too, where like it's expected. Like he can't take a day off and be like, well, I had a shitty race and I'm just gonna call it. Like, no, you gotta prove that you are who you say you are. You gotta walk the walk too.
Yeah. So that's maybe my question for you, is because it can be easy to get into that, just like what you're talking about. You finish a race, you're a runner. Like that's what you want to go run, right? You don't want to take a day off. And sometimes when we feel, even as athletes, like to take a day off is weakness, or really there's so much importance in, like, you don't even know. Sometimes you might feel good, I think is what I heard you saying, but you're really still not quite there, right?
For sure.
So how much of it is it just like, I'm just going to drive through this like David Goggins, I don't care what the doctors say, I'm just going to do it because that's who I am?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of training that a lot of, let's say, elites like miss out on, or maybe like it's you, like you want to run and like that's what you're good at, and like when you finish 100 miles, like hypothetically you're in the best shape of your life at that point, because you've put in the 4 or 5 months of training to get to that one day, and then that day, let's say that day goes perfectly and you finish and you're not injured, and you know, you're sore for a few days, but then you wake up and like, I want to use this fitness more. But I feel like when I first got into the sport, I was told you can either be number one for 2 or 3 years, or you can have a career that lasts, let's say, 5 to 20 years and be podium, maybe not first, but you won't be injured. And so like your longevity in the sport will be there. And so I think that's been like kind of my mindset from the get-go, is like, I love this so much. I don't want to burn it out too quickly, and I don't want to walk away injured. And so like I see, well, not even elites, I don't mean to put those in a box, but like like mid-packers too, like I see their race schedules or friends of mine, and I'm like, holy cow, like you're doing 100 at least once a month. Like
Yeah.
that blows my mind. Like one of my general rules, it doesn't always get followed, but like 100 every 6 months.
Okay.
And like your body can't really handle more than that. And I think that maybe like after, you know, years and years and years of doing it, like your body can. But people get into the sport and they're so hungry for it, and they have that drive and that passion, and then 2 years later, like they have a serious like Achilles injury or knee problems or lower back or whatever it is. And it's because those base miles weren't there. Like no matter how much you think they are, like to run 100 miles, like you can take it like as, oh, it's just 100 miles, but at the same time, it's 100 miles. Like that is so hard on your body. And
Yeah.
I think that's just overlooked a lot, because you get sucked into this little world where it's normal, and it's not normal.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Well, and you know, yeah, like you said, you get sucked into the world, and kind of that's all you see in your newsfeed is other people that are doing what you're doing. But the reality is like you said, like no one really knows anything about it, especially here in the US.
Right.
You know, it's really not that commonplace, but when you get inside of it, you feel like it is, or you can get trapped into that.
Well, and that's another reason like I had to step away from social media a little bit, is because like I see all these great, for me, great female runners, and to me they're racing monthly or every 2 months, and it's just like, oh, I should be doing that too. Like I want those sponsorships, and I want that recognition and whatever it is. And so you almost get sucked into racing more than is healthy for you. And you have to remind yourself, like you're seeing their highlights, like you don't see whatever like weird like injury that they're dealing with and they're racing through, or you don't see I don't know, like just everything that goes outside of that one little picture blurb that you read. And so yeah, it was just healthier for me to be like, I'm going to do my own race schedule, and that's all that matters. And like I kind of like stopped following the sport to an extent, just because like mentally for me it was too exhausting to try and keep up and to keep myself on that same level.
And what you know, just looking at your success and what you've been able to do, that I don't think there's any it's not a mistake that's happening that way, because of the approach that you're taking for that. What you talked a little bit about vision, like 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Like what is your vision for you in this coming up, say, in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So each year my race schedule, I pick one race, and that's like my dream race, and everything revolves around that single race. And so this upcoming year is a little bit different, actually. I'm on the fence between, I'm going to sign up for UTMB along with Hard Rock. And as I just talked about, not doing more than 200s, or, you know, all the rules I just laid out for myself totally goes against it. So we'll see when it gets closer how my training goes. And I mean, Hard Rock was canceled this year, and I didn't really have a backup in place. And so I want to have a backup this year, not kind of be stuck in the sand wondering what race I can possibly jump into. And so it'll be either Hard Rock or UTMB, and then that's this year. So then next year, like assuming those go well, like it'll go on to like Western or Leadville, like my top 4 races that like I'm probably just going to cycle through until I win them, and then I'll scratch them off and move on to the next. Yeah, and I feel like those are the races that like get the most recognition, make my sponsors happy, and elevate my career that much more, you know. And so I'll pick, you know, maybe 100K or a 50 miler or a few 50Ks leading into that. But I typically don't taper for those like I would for 100. Like they're more training runs. And then the 100 is like my baby for the year.
What about the Badwater? Ever had any thoughts on
I
that?
do. Yeah. I like, so it definitely appeals to me. It's just
Yeah,
there's so many races in the summer. And so you kind of have to like be strong and narrow it down
yeah,
and
yeah.
know like what really speaks to you. I would say if I had a list of like top 5 or top 6, like that would definitely be on the list.
Gotcha.
It's just the timing doesn't really work for any of my other races that I like, my top 4 races.
Sure.
Um, and I mean, it's on road, which isn't really my specialty.
Yeah, yeah.
But I feel like I would be like the heat aspect and the climbing aspect, I would really like to tackle at some point.
Okay. Yeah. Um, we're getting close to wrapping this up. Just, I got one more question I really want to ask is, we all have turning points or like critical decisions, critical moments that come up in our life. And I think you've probably already kind of talked about one of them, but yeah, is there a moment or two that really kind of pops in your head where had you chosen a different path, like than the one you did, you wouldn't be where you are today? Potentially doing something completely different, might not even be ultra running, but probably not Colorado. Like, yeah, just it really kind
Yeah.
of define us as people.
So I would say there's like 2 major turning points. The first one being um, like as a kid, like through high school, like there was nothing else I wanted to be other than like a veterinarian. Like I worked at a vet clinic for 5 years. I through high school, like I was going to go to WSU in Washington State, and I was like going to do their vet program, and like that was my dream, and I was going to, I don't know, like pursue that with everything I
Okay.
had. My senior year of high school, my parents got a divorce, and all the money went to the lawyers. so,
Oh,
so then I was kind of like stuck, like, okay, I'm paying for my own college now, and I was terrified of taking out loans, so I ended up going to community college, and after 2 years there, I just like needed to. I'd never been on an airplane before. I had never, so I was one of 6. Like we didn't go like on huge family vacations. Like we drove to the beach that was 2 hours away, and so when I did 2 years college, and then I decided to drop out or just take a break, and I got a job in Alaska, and then worked in Minnesota, then like spent a month in New Zealand and went back to Alaska, and like just traveled around as much as like I could at that point, like really just like cut all ties from my like tiny little hometown, and like really like learned who I was, which sounds corny, but
yeah,
like it was nice to like get away from that, because I grew up in like a dairy farm community, and so it's very small, like 50 in my graduating class, and so
yeah,
from like I just hopped on as many planes I could that year and just really traveled. And then I ended up in Colorado. And when I was in Colorado, I'm slowly getting to the second turning point. I
yeah.
got a job at Bubba Gum Shrimp Company,
I love it.
and yeah, like worked my way up to be a manager there. And I said, I want to climb this ladder as high as I can to my regional manager. Like, how do I do that? And so I went to New York City, and I was the head training manager in Times Square there. And I was gonna, like, my dream was just keep climbing that ladder as high as I could. And so when I was in New York City, like that Leadville drawing, I think was another huge
Yeah,
turning point. Like I
right.
wasn't entirely loving what I was doing. I was making a decent paycheck, but it wasn't like, I think just like letting go of like the typical like American dream of going to a 4-year college and becoming a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is. And then the second one is like letting go of like having to like have the money to buy that house or to have the car you want to drive, or like just anything material that like we're supposed to like pursue, and like we're supposed to work 80 hours a week and like just be exhausted all the time, and like you're supposed to take pride in that. And I think just like letting go of that and saying, I'm gonna live in Colorado and I'm gonna make $8 an hour or whatever it is working at a running store, and I'm going to be happy, but like I'm probably gonna be broke, but I'm gonna be doing what I love. And so I
Yeah.
think like coming to that realization and just like fighting through until you make it finally, that was probably the second big turning point. Because I mean, I just as easily could have grinded it out in New York, and I don't know, like I probably would
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
loved it, but I would
And it
have
would
been
have been a little
working.
bit of a safer
Yeah,
play too, right? I mean, from the outside looking in, safer play of like, hey, you already got this. You're here. Why go do this? Why go all the way over here to run this and to commit your life to giving up the
right.
things and all that. It's just awesome to hear the stories.
Well, it's like, what are your parents going to think? Like, you just moved to New
Yeah,
York City and like you're pursuing this career, and then um, like you're going to give it all up, and you're
right.
for something that like I'd finished 150 miler and I dropped Leadville at 87. So
Yeah.
like you're going to pursue this career
Yeah, yeah.
and be like a really successful trail runner, but nobody can see that dream but you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And you did it, and here you are. So that's great. It's a great story. What are one or two things that you could leave with the listeners as we do wrap this up that can help them? I mean, I like to think that the listeners are similar, driven. They want more. They want to continue to get a little bit better. And so, yeah, what's one or two things that you could maybe give them to take?
I would say finding joy in running, and finding joy in whatever it is you do, because you can have goals, and to get there it might not be enjoyable for you, and you are maybe struggling to get out for your run, or struggling just to go to work every day, or whatever it is. Like, you need to be happy, and so how do you make that happen? Like, it shouldn't be something that's painful or stressful. Like, it should be something you take true joy in. So if you're not happy in your job, like, it's so easy for me to say, but like, walk away from that job. Like, and it's so much harder if you have kids or people relying on you, but you'll be better to the people around you if you are taking enjoyment out of life. And
Yeah.
like, don't put unnecessary stress to goals that don't matter to you. Like, you should just like really truly enjoy what you're doing, and if you're not, then find a way to get there, because in the long run you'll be so much happier than if you just stick with it because you feel like you should be gutting it out.
Yeah. Totally. Thank you. What are a few ways that the listeners can find you, follow you? I know we talked about social media. And
I do social media, but I try. So Facebook is just Sabrina Stanley. Instagram is Sabrina Lee Ann Stanley. And yeah, I'd say those are like the two. I do Twitter, but it's just my Instagram feed, so you might as well just follow that.
Yeah. Okay. And what is the next race coming up?
Oh, I haven't signed up for one. Yeah, well, Hard Rock is definitely on the docket. But I would say Transvolcania, I think I'm going to sign up for and do, which is a little bit shorter than my wheelhouse. So I have to work on some speed work.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, Transvolcania will be my next one.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. It's been fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.
Bye.